Where Monica Lewinsky lives at 49 will make you cry. Over the course of recent months, we've examined a selection of the most extravagant penthouses and celebrity residences around the globe. However, what about the celebrities whose wealth is not entirely spent on extravagantly oversized residences? In which location do they reside? They might reside in cabins in the woodlands, or they might maintain a more modest existence with their companion alpacas in a trailer park. There's only one way to discover the answer. So keep watching as we examine a selection of the most renowned celebrities globally and the modest residences they've selected to reside in while remaining financially sustainable. Elijah Wood, net worth $35 million, purchased for $1 million, square footage 3,200 square feet. During the early 2000s, when he was merely 20 years old, Elijah Wood embarked on an expedition that would alter the course of his life. Wood, who portrayed Frodo Baggins in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, acquired notoriety, wealth, and all else. Despite amassing a modest fortune of nearly $35 million since then, he maintains a modest lifestyle and resides in a modest residence. It appears that Elijah Wood failed to grasp the notion that everything's larger in Texas, as his Victorian-style residence in Austin, which he purchased for less than $1 million, is a mere 3,200 square feet in size. Having spent as much time as he did in the Hobbit hole, Elijah likely considers this dwelling to be a luxury. Warren Buffett, net worth $102 billion, purchased for $31,000, square footage 65,000 square feet. By virtue of his astute business acumen and a succession of extraordinary judicious investments, Warren Buffett has amassed one of the most fortunate individuals globally for decades. Most individuals would assume that someone with a net worth in excess of $100 billion would reside in a mansion the size of a small village or possess a private island. When once questioned as to why he's lived in the same residence for so long, Buffett responded, "I would relocate if I believed I would be happier elsewhere." Despite being ranked 10th in the world in terms of fortune, Warren Buffett has expressed nothing but contentment with maintaining his residence in Omaha, Nebraska, which he acquired for slightly more than $31,000, the equivalent of about $250,000 now. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, net worth $180 million, purchased for $2.3 million, square footage 74,000 square feet. Evidently, individuals who held the belief that residing in New York was prohibitively expensive did so solely in regard to the borough of Manhattan and its immediate environs. Blake Lively and her husband, Deadpool, or should we say Ryan Reynolds, have discovered a gorgeous nesting spot 40 miles outside of the city that never sleeps for an amount that's considerably less than one might expect to pay. In New York City, $2.3 million would be sufficient to purchase a modest residence. However, in Bedford, New York, the location of Blyant's mansion, that sum was sufficient to acquire a 74,052 square foot parcel of land. It's on this property that the couple and their 3 daughters enjoy leisure time. This couple, whose combined net worth is gradually approaching $200 million, has opted for a life of seclusion rather than urban living. Zoe De Chanel, net worth $25 million, purchased for $1.69 million, square footage unknown. Despite the fact that at one point, New Girl star Zoe De Chanel was earning $95,000 per episode, which is more than the average American earns in a year, that does not imply she was irresponsibly spending that amount of money. It may come as a surprise to some, but the protagonist of New Girl was still residing on a very modest property during the show's prime season. Zoe De Chanel and her now ex-husband, Jacob Pechenak, moved in with their 2 children in 2015 from a modest Hollywood Hills property that cost her $1.69 million, which was relatively inexpensive in comparison to other properties in the area. They'd been residing on the aforementioned property since 2015. It was furnished and valued at $5.58 million. Tim Cook, net worth $1.5 billion, purchased for $1.9 million, square footage 2,400 square feet. Apple has more than doubled its revenue in the decade since Tim Cook succeeded Steve Jobs as CEO. In recognition of his efforts, Cook was awarded a $750 million bonus in the form of 5 million shares of the company, which increased his net worth to $1.5 billion. Cook, despite possessing a considerable fortune prior to receiving this incentive, elected to reside in a modest Palo Alto, California residence measuring 2,400 square feet and priced below $2 million. However, times have changed, and the Cooks have recently relocated to a modernist estate measuring 10,000 square feet and costing $9.1 million. Notably, the garage of this estate is nearly as large as that of his previous residence. Robert Pattinson, net worth about $100 million, purchased for $2.176 million, square footage 2,000 square feet. After years of being in the public eye, in part because of his role in the Twilight Saga, and in part because of his allegedly dormant relationship with Twilight co-star Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson appeared to have had enough of spending money on expensive items he would never use. Approximately 5 years ago, Pattinson rationally sold his 4,000 square foot Los Angeles residence and downsized to a residence that was roughly half its original size for just over $2 million. Behind another residence, concealed down a trail, is Robert Pattinson's private Bat Grotto. Despite being a modest 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom bungalow, this rustic residence is precisely what Pattinson requires. Lem Michelle, net worth $12 million, purchased for $1.4 million, square footage unknown. While the Glee star has recently renovated and acquired more extravagantly priced residences, she's not always lived in the comfort of luxury. It was not until the 6th season of the award-winning program that its starlet relocated into a residence befitting her celebrity status. Before relocating to her present residence, valued at $3 million, Lem Michelle occupied a comparatively more modest dwelling that she had acquired for a justifiable amount of $1.4 million. Although not a mansion, the former residence of the individual in question was a 2-bedroom cottage in Los Angeles that featured a solar-heated saline swimming pool. It was fortunate that the cottage sold for $1.825 million in 2015. Don Cheadle, net worth $40 million, purchased for $894,000, square footage 2,400 square feet. 1984 marked the momentous occasion when Don Cheadle earned his initial professional acting credit. After decades and years elapsed, both Cheadle's resume and net worth began to increase consistently. Nevertheless, despite the abundance of offers for roles, Don Cheadle resisted the urge to invest his entire fortune in a massive property. Don Cheadle acquired the 1950s bungalow for less than $1 million approximately 7 years ago. However, the industrial-style residence in Venice, California, did not remain in the family for long. Bridget Coulter, his designer wife, renovated the property, and the couple sold it for $2.45 million less than 2 years later. Kirk Cousins, net worth $70 million, purchased for $290,000, square footage 3,000 square feet. Kirk Cousins made his NFL debut in 2012 and spent his first 6 seasons with the Washington Redskins. Cousins was a professional athlete who earned millions of dollars annually, but he and his family did not leave their 3,000 square foot Ashburn, Virginia residence until he signed with Minnesota in 2018. Cousins had leased the property from a former Washington football player who had bought it in 2000 for less than $300,000. Since the 3-story residence, featuring gas fireplaces and hardwood floors, furnished all the necessary amenities for Kirk, his wife, and their 2 children, there was never a need to seek alternative accommodations. The Cousins are currently using a portion of Kirk's $70 million to build their ideal home from the ground up on the shores of Lake Michigan. Mark Zuckerberg, net worth $116.1 billion, purchased for $7 million, square footage unknown. A house for $7 million is not inexpensive, unless of course one possesses a 12-figure net worth, as social media behemoth Mark Zuckerberg certainly does. Zuckerberg, his spouse, and their 2 children are content to reside in a quaint residence in Palo Alto, California, despite the fact that it's one of the most expensive locations to reside and the opulent epicenter of American high technology, Silicon Valley. His wife and 2 children are with him. However, despite the low price of $7 million, Zuckerberg has spent over $50 million purchasing the properties surrounding his residence, only to demolish them and replace them with smaller structures. The additional seclusion provided by the neighboring residences has generated a comfortable ambiance that would delight any guardian and their offspring. Monica Lewinsky, net worth $41 million, purchased for $8 million, square footage 13,000 square feet. Monica Lewinsky, a prominent figure of the late 1990s, has initiated an extraordinary new phase in her life, which consists of purchasing a luxurious 13,000 square foot property for $8 million. Situated in a picturesque area of Sacramento, California, the domicile exemplifies her ability to bounce back and transform her life in the face of the notorious scandal. In addition to its impressive scale, the mansion exudes sophistication through its tastefully crafted interiors and cutting-edge amenities. The extraordinary house Lewinsky lived in shows how hard she worked to be successful. It shows her unwavering determination to move forward and supports the idea that life offers chances for redemption and creating one's own story. Ingvar Kamprad, net worth $58.7 billion. Purchased for undisclosed. Square footage 44,670 square feet. One might assume that Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of Ikea, the most recognizable name in interior design, resides in a mansion adorned with opulent interiors. However, this is not the case. Earlier in 2018, Kamprad was estimated to be the 8th wealthiest individual in the world at the time of his death. Despite this, he maintained a modest lifestyle for his passing. Kamprad returned to Sweden near the end of his life, and his property in Switzerland was put up for sale, albeit unpopularly. Swiss media reported that despite being listed for sale for $4.6 million, the residence was virtually worthless due to its dilapidated state. Despite the fact that the Ikea founder was notorious for his parsimonious lifestyle, the condition of his residence, to put it mildly, shocked many. Zoe Saldana, net worth $40 million, purchased for $2.5 million, square footage 6,332 square feet. The actress from Avatar desired to construct a dwelling that could serve as a refuge for her 3 young children. Her intention was to design a home with no designated kid-free areas so that her children could explore without impediments while learning to be cautious. Beyond the pragmatic considerations, Saldana stated that although she and her spouse, Marco Perego, consider it essential to surround themselves with works of art, they never intended to spend an exorbitant amount of money to accomplish that aesthetic. A significant portion of the household contents are either refurbished or custom-designed articles. Saldana wants her children to understand that it's possible to live exceptionally well on a modest budget with the proper care and attention. Graham Hill, net worth undisclosed, purchased for $750,000, square footage 400 square feet. The tree hugger founder aptly captures the essence of living in a sustainable manner. Graham Hill acquired his fortune in the early 1990s through the sale of his technology startup. However, he quickly grew weary of the notion of living extravagantly. Presently, his central tenet is that one can reside in a dwelling that has a reduced ecological and physical impact without sacrificing aesthetics or functionality. By utilizing the folding and unfolding capabilities of every item in his studio apartment, he's able to create 8 distinct functional spaces in the smallest possible space. Hill is an outspoken proponent of his philosophy that living with fewer material possessions can contribute to a more fulfilling existence. Eugene ONeal, net worth $93 million, purchased for $100,000, square footage undisclosed. Eugene ONeal built his Tao house in Danville, California, with the goal of finding a serene setting that was conducive to writing and was secluded. His interest in Oriental philosophy and his wife's aesthetic influenced the nomenclature of the residence, which they jointly interpreted as the proper way of living. On the property, they cultivated their own poultry and planted numerous trees within the residence. The home epitomized simplicity in living and a profound connection to the natural world by all accounts. ONeal wrote no further plays after his family was forced to vacate the residence for a variety of domestic reasons, including his deteriorating health after completing 5 plays there.